thank you so much for coming out today on this lovely, beautiful, warm, tropical day. Very happy to see you here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves alphabetically. So we'll start with you, Lydia.
So I'm Rin Bugatti, student at, I'm doing my Master's of Community Planning at the School of Planning at DAP, and I'm also a Fulbright Scholar from Morocco.
I'm Daniel Zimmer. I almost looked at the slide to see who I was. I'm no longer a UC student, but I studied in the Department of Literacy and Second Language Studies, my master's here, and I'm currently an ESL, English as a Second Language teacher. At the moment I work at Price Hill, teaching people from Central and South America, adult learners, and I know these two from my time at UC, and I work with Rebecca here in the UC International's English Conversation group last year as her graduate assistant. So it's good to be back on campus.
Absolutely. So I'm Rebecca Hale. I currently teach in the co-op program. I've been teaching at UC since 2011, primarily English as a second language, and in a couple of weeks I'm actually going to start working in the international office as an international services advisor, so I'm pretty excited about that. But this idea really came up last spring. We presented this at UC's Equity and Inclusion Conference back in the spring as a 1-hour sort of breeze through what we felt folks should know about supporting Muslim students at UC, and apparently the folks who came liked it pretty well, and they asked us to offer it again as a bit of a longer workshop. So any questions you have about this topic, we are happy to answer. We're going to have Q&A at the end. We're also going to have some interactive activities during the training that help us all think a little bit beyond our known boundaries. So thank you so much for coming out today. And I guess we will go ahead and get started unless there are any questions as we're opening up.
Sitting sterile.
So just a quote to open, as we mentioned, we presented this last spring at the conference, and the theme of that conference was the beloved community, Dr. King's vision of a community in which everybody is valued, everybody has a place, everybody is respected and appreciated. As he often said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He felt justice could not be parceled out to individuals or groups, but that it was the birthright of every human being in the beloved community. He said, "I've fought too long, too hard against segregated public accommodations to end up separating the moral concerns. Justice is indivisible." We are far from attaining this goal of creating a beloved community, but one of the themes that we're hoping to reinforce today is that the more awareness institutions such as UC can develop of any specific student population, the greater that awareness will open up to understanding that there are students of many different backgrounds. We can't exclude one without excluding others. We can't exclude one and leave it at that. So if I'm sure there you, I'll turn it over to Maria.
Thank you, Rebecca. So we're going to go through images that actually show the current situation of how we portray Muslims in the US. So in the context of a high number of refugees, in the context of Islamophobia, in the general context of fear from the other. We are going through certain images. Like for instance, this is the Islamic Center in America. We say you go home, Google shape, so it's like on the wall of the mosque. Here we have a demonstration. People say, "Oh, I need to know about Islam. I learned on 9/11." So that's actually a very narrow vision of what Islam is. Never Sharia law again in America. So Sharia law doesn't exist in a lot of Muslim countries. No Islamophobia in my name. I love my Muslim neighbors. So besides these people who are actually very narrow-minded in regard to what the Muslim community is, there are also a lot of people who are actually advocating for Muslim rights and for Muslim inclusion in the US and all the other minorities actually.
Just checking, can you hear us in the back?
Speak a little louder.
Sorry, okay. We'll try to speak up a bit.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So also Muslims invented coffee. Have some respect. Everyone drinks coffee, so. And so this is what we're going to introduce today. So how Muslim students actually express their faith and their identity in the context of American universities, and how we are actually trying to combine our identity to a complete different cultural context that we arrive to, either from different countries or also for people who were raised and born, who were born and raised as Muslim in the US. So I'm going to start this presentation and I'm going to talk about my own experience as a student. So I lived almost my whole life in Morocco. I traveled to a lot of countries, but in August 2017, this would have been my first time in Morocco. I arrived to the US for the first time, and it was a bit complicated in the beginning, but also it was different. And I'm gonna try to tell you why it was different for a Muslim student to live in American here. So, as you all know now, my name is Mariam, I'm Muslim, but when I introduce myself as a Muslim, I have different reactions from people. So one of them will be like, well, you don't even look like a Muslim, but how a Muslim person looks like, actually, we don't know. Do you wear hijab back home, but take it off when you are traveling abroad? Well, actually not. This is how I dress, this is how I am also back home, so it's important to know that being Muslim is an identity, but there's like not one identity. There's not one way to be a Muslim. So is it true that in your country women are forced into marriage and killed if they date a foreigner? So this actually happened in one of the classes. So like this was one of the comments of one of the students in classes, and it's actually it's a bit strange to hear certain comments like that when you're in graduate school, attending school with black people that are supposed to be like highly academically qualified. So it's a bit strange and weird, but then you realize how the media control actually our minds and control the way we perceive other people. And sometimes it's a bit so people don't know how to react to that. So we're gonna show you a video called I Am Muslim, but I'm not.
I am Muslim, but I'm not angry.
I'm Muslim, but I'm not forced to wear a headscarf. I'm Muslim, but I don't wear the hijab.
I'm Muslim, but I'm not dangerous unless we're on the dance floor.
I'm Muslim, but I don't care if you're Shia or Sunni or Sufi, embrace them all. I'm Muslim, but I'm not a terrorist.
But I'm not a terrorist.
But I'm not a terrorist.
But I'm not stopped at airports because my name is Tom and I'm white. I'm Muslim, but I'm not Arab. I am Muslim, but I love Jews.
I'm Muslim, but I'm not an immigrant.
I'm Muslim, but I'm not homophobic.
But I'm not prejudiced towards others, but I don't hate America.
I'm Muslim, but I'm not easily offended.
I'm Muslim, but I don't look like one.
I am Muslim, but I had bacon one time on accident. It was good.
I'm Muslim, but I don't scream Allahu Akbar randomly out loud.
I am Muslim, but I wasn't the one who told kids that there was no Santa.
I'm Muslim, but you can be whatever you want to be.
I'm Muslim and I'm a feminist. I'm Muslim and I believe in equality. I'm Muslim and I'm descended from pilgrims on the Mayflower.
I'm Muslim and I love listening to rap music.
I am Muslim and I love Thanksgiving.
And I was born and raised in Los Angeles.
And I'm an actress. I'm Muslim and I love dancing.
And I'm a spoken word poet. And I'm a hip hop artist. And I ride a motorcycle.
And I love Ohio State football.
I'm Muslim and I love smiling.
I'm a Muslim and I date, even though my parents hate it.
I'm Muslim and I like to surf. And I'm a writer.
And my best friends are not Muslim.
And I'm a convert. What? I'm Muslim and that doesn't contradict with being American.
I'm Muslim and my religion teaches me to love everyone.
But yeah, as you said, like being Muslim is very, as I said, like we take part into a lot of activities and we are so different while being Muslim. So what I'm going to show next is what is to be a Muslim student in university in the US. I was very lucky actually when I arrived to the US to find a community of international students from all over the world, and these people traveled far from their country to be here. So it was interesting to be actually with this student to build a community and to feel to have a new feeling of belonging to a community. And I think UC International is doing a great work to organize a lot of events where a lot of students take place. So like for instance here is students from the ESL class, and we went to
St. Patrick's Day?
yeah, St. Patrick in downtown. And here it was the
prom.
Yeah, the prom at the aquarium at Newport. Here one of the students of my class invited us to a dinner at her place. She's Indian and she could make food for everyone. It was great to have it all together. The pumpkin carving last year organized also by UC International. The Eid celebration. So Eid, so for people who don't know what Eid is a religious celebration. We have two main Eids in our religion. So one of the things that I was missing is celebrating Eid, because usually back home it's a day off. We don't get day off here, so it was good to be celebrating that like 2 weeks after the main day. And it's also conferences that we take part to with our classmates and sometimes faculty members. But what is missing? So I would like to mention something very important is that American students rarely take part into these events. It's mainly international students together. So in the classroom or outside the classroom, there is a huge gap between American students and international students. And sometimes we feel it because as a Fulbright scholar myself, like one of my missions is to be an ambassador of my culture, but also to get embedded into the culture that I am living in and to get to know more about the people. And that is lacking a lot in, I would say, in the university. So I think I don't know how that would work. I don't know how we can get like American students more involved with the international community, but I think it would only bring amazing results and amazing aspects of the overall UC community. So so outside the university, it's amazing. We're having fun, but sometimes within the classroom, it can be tough for Muslim students for a lot of reasons. So one of the reasons is whenever terrorist attacks are brought up into a discussion, we have to justify our faith and religion. So there are a lot of incidents where I hear from a lot of classmates and from a lot of people, Muslim people that I know, that we can easily display videos where we insult Arab people and nobody would react in class. We would talk about the Muslim religion as being a religion of killing and a hostile religion. And when students will be involved into debate, professors won't react. They won't be a mediator, knowing that these debates are taking place into their classrooms. And sometimes professors are biased when it's about the Muslim religion. So themselves are not aware of what to say and not to say within the classroom. In regards to the Muslim students. So I think it's very important for the professors to be aware of the limitations to the material used in the classes. Also, there are some restrictions in regard to foods and in regard to drinks. So when we are attending events such as tailgating, it is important to know that we don't apologize. We're not eating salads, we're happy to share the moment with you, but there are foods that we cannot have. And there are also some events that we cannot attend, such as the bar crawl, because we're not so keen on going to bars and drinking, so it's a part of our, it's restricted in our religion. So yeah, that's a thing too. And also, as I said earlier, when important religious celebrations as Eid al-Adha, which is one of the religious celebrations I talked about, or like any other day of the year, that may be a little bit impactful for us as students, because it's a complete new thing. As I said, a lot of us live in their countries for a long time, so we're used to be celebrating these things every year, and then you arrive in a new country, you're not within your community, and in addition to that, you cannot celebrate your important religious fests, so that might be impactful. So, in order to understand the situation of Muslim students, and in order to understand what they are going through, their constraints and all that, we tried to do a quick survey. And the first question was, as a Muslim, do you think you have been treated differently based on your faith? If so, how? The second question was, as a Muslim student at UC, do you think there are some aspects that enhance and empower your identity, and as a member of a multicultural, wider community? And the question 3 is, in addition to the pre-mentioned aspects, what can be improved to ensure an inclusionary environment for Muslim students at UC? So as an answer to this question, we had like very different answers because there are like two groups of Muslim students that should be identified. So the first ones are the ones who were born and raised here and who are actually by default kind of integrated into the American culture. They have been raised here, so they know what it's all about. And the second group is the group who actually moved here only for studies. So this is how we would explain the differences between the answers. So like there are completely different answers. Some people say that they have been treated differently, others not. Some say that they have a way to express their identity, especially when they are well connected to the existing communities. So like people who know that there is a mosque not far from here, people who know actually that there is a community of refugee that is implemented. There is a community of refugee that is existing here, and the Muslim community is helping in the Westchester Mosque. So there's a tutoring program happening there. So whenever the more these people are connected, the more they feel empowered, and the more they feel that they are an inclusive community. So yeah. So this was like the experience inside and outside the classroom. What about the outcomes? So it is important to mention that there is a correlation between inclusion and GPA. It might not be very important for the graduate students, but it is for the undergraduate students. So in one of the articles written by Shafiqa Ahmadi, she mentions she mentions the following questions in the article entitled "Reconsidering Campus Diversity and Examination of Muslim Students' Experiences." So, does a religious preference of Islam significantly influence the kinds of college experiences students have on campus? And if so, are there differences between Muslims and their Jewish and Christian peers? And are there also differences between Muslim, Jewish, and Christian students' academic achievement and overall educational satisfaction? So, I would say that it is important to think about the context that we are currently in, and to think that there is an image that every university or every institution is veiculating. So it is important for UC to have a welcoming and an open image towards students that are coming into the university, and it is important also to have a support system. So as a student, when I come to university and I have no community and I need to build a complete new community, I need members, I need people, I need organizations that I'm going to reach out to be able to fulfill my goal, which is building a new community. So it is important actually for me to have a community in order to achieve a good GPA, because we cannot live without our ecosystem. We are not like individuals that cannot live without our society. And I think that we cannot also differentiate the personal life from the professional and the academic life. And this is why it is important for these people to be comfortably implemented into an inclusive community in order to achieve a good GPA and a good academic career. So she states the student-faculty interactions appear to have the most impact during students' first couple of years in college, whereas in the latter years of students' college experience, these interactions appear to have more influence on students' academic growth than on performance. And she concludes by saying no classroom interaction, not her, but Caroline enters in, no classroom interactions with peer have not positive impact on learning. So this actually joins what I said previously in regard to the improvements of the community and the GPA and the academic performance. Okay, so we'll go now to the second section of our presentation, and
hello. So, like I said, my name's Daniel. I'm not a Muslim. I'm actually Jewish. And interestingly, I was thinking about this while watching Marin's part of our presentation here. I'm not an especially religious Jew. I have a pretty secular life. But during my time here as a student and my time as a student at Ohio University where I went for undergrad, I knew that the Hillel House was there if I needed a place to go where there were other Jewish people or a community that I could go to. And even if I wasn't heavily involved in the work there, knowing that it was there as a source of potential support meant a lot to me. It's just a side note. So I'm going to talk to you about some fun topics, Islamophobia, racism, and bias. So get ready to feel uncomfortable. Okay, so quick introduction. This is sort of a thought experiment. Just bear with me here. Wait, that's not how it's supposed to go. We'll see. We'll go back to the thought experiment in a moment. But what I am going to talk about here is how Islamophobia is racist, in essence, and why you should care that it's racist, why it's not just an academic exercise to say that it's racism. There we go. And how a perceptions of Muslim students can foster or discourage the growth of a beloved community. And those perceptions, I'm also talking about positive perceptions, not just negative perceptions. Positive stereotypes exist as well and can have effects other than what we intend. You gotta push the button. Oh, you got okay. So here's my thought experiment. We have extra time. Okay. So the thought experiment is think of China. Okay, that's it. Experiment concluded. China is a country with I don't know, at least 1 billion people, right? 1 billion people. More or less, I think more at this point. But there are also about 1 billion Muslim people in the world. So my thought experiment is this. Imagine if China, if you had to imagine China as being a Muslim country. By the way, there are Muslim people in China who are struggling for representation and basic human decency, to be treated with basic human decency. But that aside, if you imagine that China were a Muslim country, if you had 1 billion people living in the country of China and they were all Muslim, what would it be like? Okay. Well, your response to this, and whatever you have in your head, whatever image you have in your head of what this country would be like, what would the people be wearing? What would the architecture be like? What would the smells be like? What languages would you be hearing? What kind of music would you be hearing? What kind of art or culture? Right? You can populate your mind with these sorts of images, but they're going to vary, right? If you have lived in or visited China, you're going to have one view. If you are Muslim, and maybe a Muslim who has lived in or visited China, you'll have a different view. If you have never been to China, and you are not a Muslim like me, you have an altogether different image, right? So this is a very simple question I have is, where do we get these images? Well, our friend Lord Google has I did an image search here, and here's what I got. Does the laser work on this? Cool, yeah, alright. So, we got some prayers. These are a little unhappy here. This looks pretty reasonable. This guy, Jesus will destroy the cross and follow the Quran. So not the most welcoming people. We have some Trump people here. They made it onto the Muslim search. Don't ask me how. We have this guy. He's having a bad day. And then we have these guys with knives covered in something that looks like blood. So, not exactly a benign portrayal, right, of this group of people. So I want to dig into this a little bit. Actually, before I do that, I want to dig into this a little bit and say, like, look, maybe we don't see this guy when we think of Muslims, but people do. You know, people do see that in their minds. People do think that, and we can probably easily point to things like, oh, it's the media, and it's true, it is, in many ways. But I bet that an image like this, even if it wasn't the first thing in your mind, I would not. How do I say this? I don't suppose you were surprised to see this here. Right? Because we know that these images are out there, and even if we don't make these associations on our own, they've made it into our minds as well. And even if we are not ourselves overtly racist or prejudiced or hateful people, right? That's still in our minds. So I wanted to dig into that issue and understand why it is that we have these. So before we talk about how we see Muslim students, talk about how the Muslim students see themselves, well, I can't answer that because I'm not a Muslim student. We have real Muslim people here to talk about themselves that we can listen to. But the issue, that question is still a complex question that we can examine, right? We have this idea, you perhaps heard the term intersectionality, right? Our individual identities are a very complex interweaving of all of these different sorts of variables, your education, your family status, your gender, your history. And to come up with your own label for yourself or your own identity, right, that's a personal process that's always going to be in flux. And if somebody puts you on the spot and says, what are you? It's a very uncomfortable question. Carbon-based human? I'm a person? I don't know. But aside from the really extreme examples like what we see here, right, we also end up doing imputing, that's the word. Revisiting some comments that we heard from Mariam. She mentioned somebody said to her, well, you don't even look like a Muslim. What does that even mean? It's difficult to say. What is the message from a statement like that? You don't look like my version of a Muslim. What is my version of a Muslim? It's whatever amalgamation of images and ideas that have been fed into my head by the society and culture that I live in. Nice to meet you. So, that's imputation. You impute an identity, and so you take this idea, this image that you have in your mind, and you're sticking it on the person that you're looking at. And you're not seeing them anymore. You're seeing your version of them. So, the simplest way to learn about the Muslim experience is to listen and to shut up. Pardon my bluntness, but it's true, right? And this is the same for learning about any group of people. If you're not part of that group of people, you can learn a lot by just listening to them. Okay. Hit me. Oh, there we go. So, back to what I wanted to dig into. Where do these stereotypes come from? And why do we have these images in particular of Muslim people, these kind of violent, atavistic sorts of portrayals of them? Will you hit the thing? Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, we can turn to one figure, Edward Said. He was a Palestinian philosopher, writer, academic, and he is known for coining the term Orientalism. Orientalism is a deep, deep subject that I don't have time to dive into with you all today, but I highly recommend that you, all of you, if you have not had occasion to, look into Mr. Said's work. The basic idea behind Orientalism is this. We've all heard of the idea of the Orient, right? We've heard this term before. Well, we go back in history, we can see in culture that Westerners, I guess it would be us, right? That Westerners and Easterners, that there's this divide between West and East. And that West is the sort of norm, the default, right? And the East is these other weird folks with the East, right? And so we see here, this is a painting to cover this book actually. It's a very charged painting from the French artist Jean Gérôme, who was part of an art movement in the late 19th century called Oriental Romanticism. So you had all these European white guys who were just fetishizing the idea of going to Turkey or Morocco or have you and seeing harems and smoking hookahs and belly dancing. And it's a very caricaturized, very ignorant view of a place that these artists had not really seen. In this particular case, you have these men that are in basically what is, I'm told, a mosque, yeah, a place of worship. You have this boy here, he's not wearing any clothes because he was most likely meant to be a court eunuch, so to speak. And so he's entertaining these men, and there's a snake charmer here, right? So you can see why it's a slightly problematic artwork, right? So Said goes, let's see, we hit the button. Mm-hmm. Said looks into this history. Here's another example of, I think this was called The Fanatics of Tangier. I think this painting, is this a Delacroix painting?
Yes.
Yeah, from Eugène Delacroix, who's another French painter of this sort of thing. And you just see utter chaos in the streets. You see some sort of bear animal, somebody's waving a flag, right? So this is how they're portraying the Orient, right? They're strange, erratic people. They have violence in the streets. They have strange customs and strange ways. And we don't just see this in portrayals of Muslim people in Muslim countries. We also see this in portrayals of East Asian people, Indian people. And you see it today, even still, in movies and popular culture. Let's continue. So this, Said points out that Islam is being portrayed as something that belongs to the Orient, right? It's this tradition, this lineage of people that belongs to this other place over there in the East. And this comes from his article, I think it was in The Nation, published originally, called Islam Through Western Eyes in 1980. Great article. Highly recommend reading it. We go to the next slide. So, quick quote, right? According to Said, you can hit it again, as of the 20th century, right, as far as the U.S. seems to be concerned, it is only a slight overstatement to say that Muslims and Arabs are essentially seen as either oil suppliers or potential terrorists. Now, this was nearly 40 years ago that this was written, but you could read it and say, yeah, I see that today, I think. Let's go to the next slide here.
It's really stubborn.
It's thinking about that quote. So another point Mr. Said makes to us is that whole swatches of Islamic history, culture, and society simply do not exist except in the truncated, tightly packaged stories made current by the media. Right? So if you read Said and read about Orientalism, you'll see that these particular kinds of portrayals in his argument are the product of an Orientalist way of looking at the world. And so even though we're talking about the 21st century media portrayals of Muslims or Arab people, Arab Muslim, because not all Arabs are Muslim, this is still an issue that has been a portrayal, really, that has been happening for decades, if not hundreds of years. Interestingly, long ago, the term Semitic, right, did not just refer to Jewish people. Today you hear the term anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is hatred against Jewish people. But the Semitic people, right, it's actually many different peoples. And a long time ago, Jews, Muslims, Druze people, many different groups that were connected to the Semitic lineage, they were always kind of lumped together. You really only had the emergence of these distinct kind of racialized categories within the last century or century and a half in the popular sort of discourse. And a lot of that is due to Orientalism. So, keep going. What we're left with, tightly packaged, controlled images that we get from the media, are thoughts of these are the people who are in charge in the Islamic world, right? Gaddafi, Osama bin Laden, and the Ayatollah Khomeini, right? Pretty negative portrayal, right? If you're a Muslim person trying to live your normal, everyday Muslim life and go to work and be with your family, right? And then people think of this when they see you, right? It's not going to feel good. But, we go to the next slide. On the other hand, you have positive portrayals, right? Like Aladdin and Jasmine, A Whole New World, and I Dream of Jeannie, she's a little thing. And our friend Apu from The Simpsons, right? It's very delightful. So, are these offensive images? Do you feel like they're offensive? Like, they're coming out with a live action Aladdin movie. Right? Oh, brother. So, I don't know. It's interesting. We're going to come back to those pictures in a second here. Let's see. Does it go? Yeah, go ahead. So, maybe you're thinking, and I doubt many of you are thinking of this, but maybe you know somebody who's thinking this. Isn't Islam a religion, not a race? And I'm okay with Muslims, I just don't agree with their religion. These kinds of thoughts are out there. Or maybe, hitting it. Or maybe you're thinking, people are way too sensitive about this stuff. Why can't I just enjoy a Disney movie or a classic TV show without offending somebody? Or The Simpsons is hilarious when I take a joke. People are a bunch of, this is Generation Snowflake. I'm upset. I'm offended. If you're not thinking these thoughts, I'm sure you can think of somebody in your life who would think these thoughts, or you have heard somebody espouse these thoughts. There are a lot of ways we can respond to this. First of all, the issue on the first slide of Islam being a race or a religion, well, it's true. We do have Islam as a religion and tradition as a practice, right? This is an umbrella under which many different people from many nationalities and races can be a part of. That's true. You do have the practice and tradition of Islam. But you also have the popular understanding of what Islam is, and you also have stereotypes about Muslims. And so in many people's mind, Islam is not connected to, oh, this person who's white could be a Muslim, this person who's black could be a Muslim. They're thinking Arabs, or they're at least thinking dark-skinned people, right? There is a distinct connection to the idea of a racial category in many people's minds. As far as Generation Snowflake goes, let's keep going here. Actually, before we get to this, sorry, it's been a long day. The snowflakiness question, right, is not just about being sensitive. There are real, concrete, destructive events that have arisen because of people's perceptions of Muslims. This is some data from Pew Research about the rise of anti-Muslim assaults in the United States. This was as of 2017, right? So here, anti-Muslim assaults, these were assaults that were reported to the FBI. In 2001, after the 9/11 attacks, you had 93 attacks reported. In 2016, you had 127 attacks reported. So these are assaults, right? These are assaults based strictly on a person's fear or hatred of somebody else for appearing to be Muslim. This is from the website muslimadvocates.org. They have an ongoing live updating tracker of hate crimes against Muslim people in the United States. So you can just see the map is covered in them.
Wyoming, which apparently is the place to be, because nobody knows.
Wyoming's doing a great job. Interestingly, the same people who are so hateful towards Muslims, like they probably hate Jewish people, they probably hate black people, they probably hate gay people, any people that aren't them, right? And we've seen in the last year alone a rising in attacks against Jewish people, shootings at synagogues, right? So, maybe you're not Muslim, maybe you don't know anybody who is Muslim, but we're all in this together, right? If it starts with them, it's not going to end with them, and we have to look out for each other. Here is the question of race, right? Here's some headlines. A Jewish woman mistaken for a Muslim. Women who were mistaken for Muslims were assaulted, right? You look Muslim, you must be Muslim. Therefore, violence. This headline even, Hindu beat him because he's Muslim. Let's puzzle that one out for a moment. So you can see even the media, right, are not exactly the paragon of responsibility when it comes to how they portray these things. So it's not just people being ignorant, it's also the way we talk about those people. Let's keep going here. Don't take my word for it. There's a whole syllabus, your class you can teach, called Islamophobia is Racism, right? And actually, if you go to the website, the link here, I assume we'll be sending out the presentation to people.
We certainly.
Google it! Alright. Planning. I'm not a planner. Alright. So, yeah. You can check this out. Islamophobia is Racism. If you Google it, you will find links to all of the readings that you could use for teaching this course. You can find works from Edward Said, who I've already mentioned. You can find many other engaging and thoughtful pieces of writing. So let's continue here. Now, back to the snowflakey stuff, right? I'm not a racist. Yeah, sure, I can see why people are a little unhappy about movie characters and TV shows, but it's just entertainment. Is it really offensive? Can't we find common ground, right? And that's kind of the rallying cry these days among our country's so divided, we need to find common ground. And my feeling about that is that the term common ground often gets used by people who are sort of tone policing, right? Putting down other people for not being their version of civil or polite enough. And so you're not allowed to get angry, you're not allowed to get upset. I know this is not surprising to many people here. But let's respond to that, so let's keep going here. Back to our friends. Who is doing the cherry picking, right? These are, we could say these are offensive. We could say they're not offensive. I don't know what your personal opinion on it is. But one thing to consider is this. Even though none of these are attacking the people that they're portraying, right? We are getting a very specific kind of glimpse of how characters that have been formed by popular perception, right? We have, society has kind of cherry-picked these things, even the colors, I love it, between here and here, same color scheme, right? In the Middle East, it's always sunsetted, you can fly on a purple carpet, and there's whatever this is, I don't know. But even with the best of intentions, right, we can still be flattening people to these portrayals. Apu on The Simpsons, I love The Simpsons, I mean, it's brilliant. But we have to admit, right, who's the only Indian person we really see on that show? It's this one guy who has the same shtick every episode, right? So the line between offensiveness that is egregious and aggressive and hateful, and offensiveness that's like well-intentioned but playful or just ignorant, right? That line kind of waggles back and forth. So let's keep going.
Yeah, I also want to talk about the image that is regulated for Muslim women. So like Muslim women are more, there's like highly likely chances for a Muslim woman to be, I would say, assaulted or like discriminated against as compared to a Muslim man. So even like on the picture on the right, you can see that she's pictured as just an object, like with colors and like, which usually people would think when they see a woman fully covered, they would think that she's oppressed, that she's uneducated, that she doesn't have any rights, which is completely wrong. So I always tell people that I know, I'm a Muslim woman, I'm educated, my family is really pro-education and pro-woman empowerment. So it's really important for people to know that and be aware of that.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
We had a discussion about the media as we were reviewing things before we presented today, and we were trying to find this video clip, and I couldn't remember which comedian it was, but he was trying to explain how, the bad stuff gets into the news, right? And he talked about why wouldn't you have associations of Muslims being terrorists if the only time you're seeing Muslims is when there are explosions, right? There are terrorist attacks, etc. And he said, imagine if you're living in another country and the only time you see Americans in the news is when you see really uneducated, extreme folks living out in the country attacking each other with pitchforks. He said, that would definitely skew your perception. We also talked about, the bottom line and how, Hollywood feeds off of our perceptions, right? Russians have also been the bad guy in how many films for how many decades? They know that will sell. They know that will tap into an existing fear, and it just pretty much snowballs from there.
One of my favorite examples of this sort of trope also is, I've seen it referred to as space Jews. Okay, so these would be Jewish characters are often like merchants of some kind, and they all have this posture, and they all have gigantic ears and noses. There you go. Every procedural drama I see when they get like the guy's lawyer, it's like Mr. Horowitz, the Jewish lawyer. My dad's a lawyer. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So here are some examples, right, of people responding to probably well-intentioned comments, right? I am an international student from Canada. So what does your hair look like today? She said as she pulled off my hat without my permission. Right? That's just rude. Courtney, I never see you as a black girl. I don't even understand what that's supposed to mean. But I guess the person meant well, right? Here's some responses. Get over it. There are many more awful things. But my best friend is Hispanic, right? In addition to my ESL teaching work, I do some driving for Lyft. And I had a woman tell me, apropos of I don't even know what, I can't be homophobic because I'm half gay. And I said, does that mean that you're bisexual? And she said, no, my uncle's gay.
Oh.
So the reasoning, right? I don't know, but people often think like, oh, I like this person falls into this group, therefore I don't actually have any problems with this group. So,
Research shows it takes knowing one person to shift your perceptions.
yes, exactly. And finally, are you bald under your hijab? Right, these are the kind of questions I'm going to ask people. It's interesting for me as a Jewish person because Jewish people, I think, have had some decades more time as a group to like assimilate culturally than Muslims have. But I was the only Jewish kid at my school growing up, and I to this day meet adults my age who have never met a Jewish person before. I've had people ask if they can touch my hair. I've had people, which like, I mean, I have great hair, but no, really, people ask if they can touch my hair, and it's like, why? Like, you've seen curly hair before, it's not that big of a deal. I've had people ask, do you speak Jewish? Can you make the sound? And a question that I don't just hear as a Jewish person, I think a lot of people hear this, are questions that start with the phrase, do you guys? Do you guys eat this? Do you guys go to this? Do you guys have this? Do you guys do that? Right? It puts people in such an awkward position. And I think kind of understand that, so that's the point. Considering what you just saw, right, these responses to these things, what are the assumptions behind these questions or remarks? If you say to your friend, Courtney, I don't even see you as my black friend, right? What's the assumption behind that kind of statement? What do you all think? What intention could a person possibly have to make a statement like that? Why would they imagine that being okay to say to their friend? Yeah, what do you think?
They're saying that I know everyone thinks black people are bad, but I don't think you're bad, so I don't even see you as black people.
For example, right. There could be a lot of ways that whatever that person was thinking, right, but it's sort of like saying, yeah, even though there's all these negative things about being a black person or a Hispanic person or whatever sort of person, I don't see those things. I only see you, the real you, which is completely separate somehow from the fact that you are actually a black person. So it's the reasoning is interesting, right? Are these people responding to hostility or to friendliness? Do we think the comments that they were responding to were hostile? Overtly? Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't think overtly they were intended to be hostile, but I think they could have felt hostile. Like, perhaps you've heard the term microaggressions. People heard this term. Everybody's heard that. The person, the microaggressor, is not often aware of their tone or what they're putting out there. And I say this being a person who, I am fully aware of what that is. I am fully aware of how my good intentions can come across. And I will still say things that I realize, like, oh my god, that was the worst possible thing you could have said. Why did you say that? And I have apologized to people after some somewhat awkward exchanges that I've had. But that's the uncomfortable stuff that we have to dig into, right?
That's the stuff that actually builds the common ground that everybody loves to talk about.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Finally, what power dynamics are at play, right? The people who are making these sort of microaggressive comments, right? They're assuming like that their intention gives them enough kind of status over the other person that the result of it doesn't affect them. I think that's especially important to realize in an institution, like an academic institution. Even the most educated and worldly and empathetic and understanding among us, like we are all still capable of inadvertently making students uncomfortable, making people uncomfortable, putting them on the spot in ways that we don't mean to. And it is hard to look at ourselves and admit that, but that's where we're going with this. So let's go to the next slide here. Were you going to say? I didn't see you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It also comes to knowledge because there are minorities and we cannot know everything about minorities. So I have a black friend and sometimes we have discussions about like racial segregation in class and like there are some comments that people are not aware they are doing because they think that they know. well, no, we don't know everything because we haven't been living in the same situations. We have no knowledge sometimes of the history because we didn't do enough readings on the topic. So it's important to acknowledge that we are ignorant on a certain topic to be able to have a discussion and to be able to build a common ground.
Yes.
That mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was going to say, piggybacking off that really quickly, that one of my favorite teachers, speakers, Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist speaker, he has said something to the effect, and I'm going to butcher this, but this is beautifully, but this is something to the effect of, like, in order to truly understand others, we have to completely set aside our assumptions, right, to find that common ground. And that is a difficult thing to ask anybody to do, because it means taking aside all those, but I have a reason for that, I have a reason for that. And just, shh, you know. So.
He also says, how can you love someone if you're not able to be present with them? Which taps into the listening component.
What's your role in this? It's your call. So, we all have to consider our biases, implicit, explicit, whatever they may be, the assumptions and microaggressions that we may put out there. But there might also be moments when a friend, a colleague, a loved one, somebody, you know, puts their foot in their mouth in some way they don't even realize, and they might mean perfectly well. It is so difficult to confront people about those things. Okay? And how do you do it? I love you, but that was racist. How do you say that to a person? That's a difficult thing to say. Stop and listen, right? If you find somebody saying things like, I think it's the next thing, I know this will sound bad, or I'm not racist or anything, I know how this will sound, but I for myself say that. I know how this will sound. God, I'm really saying that. I don't have anything against Muslims, but, you know, these are the sorts of red flags that signal microaggression.
Great. Often this signals that whatever is not meant to be rude actually will be rude, right? Although occasionally, you know, I have coworkers who will want to ask a question about my hijab or something, and they'll say maybe 4 of these and just say, is it a holiday? Is that why it's white today? I'm like, no. But thanks for prefacing a really simple question, but often what comes after this is not a really simple question.
Yeah. I will say, I first met Rebecca at a UC International event at the Cincinnati Zoo. It was a really hot July day. And I just was like, you must be hot. And she said, you know, I think everybody's hot today. So, but really all I want to get to this, and it seems like many of you have thought about these sorts of issues before, but it's never too late to revisit them, right? It is to have some self-reflection, self-awareness, even if it makes you uncomfortable. The overlap between thinking and feeling, that's where understanding happens. And unfortunately, like, the feeling part of this Venn diagram often includes things that are not so savory to feel. And it's a difficult thing to admit that even when we mean well, we could still be making it worse by saying anything. It's just difficult, especially for somebody like me. You can tell, like, I want to talk it out. So with that in mind, let's get uncomfortable. Yeah, it's gonna be cool. Is everybody Clint Eastwood from the movie Gran Torino? Very interesting movie. Looking disgusted. So we are going to invite you to take the implicit association test from Harvard University. This is a test that will, how would you explain it?
Has anyone taken one of Harvard's implicit association tests before? A good handful of folks in the room. So Project Implicit is a major research project through Harvard University. They've created a number of tests that are designed to identify any hidden, implicit, unconscious bias in the user. We've created a tiny URL if you want to go to the link, but you can also simply Google Harvard Implicit Bias Test. There are a number of tests if you want to basically check yourself onto your sort of back of your mind perceptions or beliefs you may hold about folks who are Black, who are Muslim, who are differently abled, who are queer, etc. There's a list of more tests that they're adding every year, and there is one test on Muslims and Arabs that we're actually going to ask you to take about 5 minutes or 10 minutes to do just on your phone or your laptop, whatever device you have with you. You will not need to share your results with anybody, but we'll actually ask you to take the test. We'll talk about it a little bit, and it'll give us all the opportunity to just see what's going on in the back of our mind as far as this unique population of people happens to go. So you can Google it, or you can use this tiny URL, whatever is easier. Andrew, have you taken it yet? No? Okay.
I took it.
We took it together last week.
I'll tell you later.
Yeah, and if someone wants to share their results, they're welcome to.
Yeah.
So waiting about 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If anybody has trouble finding the link or accessing it, let us know.
It's hard to ask people to take this. Do you want to take this test to see if you're whatever?
I've used this at a teaching school with some engineering students before. They tend to have a ton of questions about what's in the algorithm that they use to design this test, and it's rigged and it's set up and it's that sort of thing. So I know nothing about the algorithm, I just know they researched it and tested it a lot. And the results are for your eyes alone. Okay, we're going to go ahead and debrief our results a little bit. Like I said, you don't have to share them with anybody, but just talk about what you experienced in taking the test. So a couple questions, if you can turn to one or two people sitting close to you. How do you feel after taking this test? If you had to choose one word to describe your experience taking it, what would it be? Might it be tired or intrigued or guilty, depressed, skeptical, confused, whatever it might have been. And are there any questions that you have now that you have taken the test? So let's take about 5 minutes and just chat with somebody sitting near you.
Is it learned behavior?
But yeah, I think it does. I think it does. Like in that moment. And that
I guess this is what I'm saying. Okay, so this is and it's like different kinds of people, different always like this. It's like
all those important conversations we talked about needing to have. Great, actually, yeah, that's okay. So we are going to pull your attention back. We've got about half an hour left. So anyone feel comfortable sharing how you felt after taking the test? Other than stressed, I heard that a couple times.
I saw some like intense concentration happening. Like video game.
Or would anybody like to share your one word with us? Was anyone surprised?
This isn't my one word, but I was sharing that I have a lot of Muslim friends that are very near and dear to my heart. So I felt like I was trying to associate like the Arab Muslim names with the right categories as fast as I possibly could, because I've done these tests before and I knew that's how I was judged. So I was like trying to make sure like, oh, I gotta get this into the right category fast enough. So it gives me like a positive result, I guess.
I mean, for me, I wasn't surprised in my results. I came out with a moderate automatic preference for other people over Muslims. What I think, reflecting back on it, is part of that response was because of my reactions with people, and I don't even know if they're Muslim or not. And what I'm saying is, you know, in my community or in the black community, there's a lot of corner stores, the gas stations, and you go in and there are a lot of Arabic-looking people running or operating them. Are they Muslim or not? I don't know. I've never asked them. What I'm upset about is $2 for a 50-cent bag of chips. So that economics, you know, part of it kicks in. Yeah.
I share your feelings.
And that's how we can play it out.
Because it's 2 a.m. and I'm hungry. You know,
Exactly. I don't care where you're from. I just want my chips.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anyone else feel like sharing what your one word might be?
I wonder, did anybody else try to, like, with the awareness that your responses were being timed, did you try to game that a little bit? Try to, you know, like, you know what I mean? It sounds like something
Yeah,
you did a little bit.
I'm very competitive. So I'm really good with memory games. I kept memorizing the association of things and going as fast as I can.
Yeah.
But when it came to like categorizing like other people or Arab and Muslims and the good or bad kind of, I completely ignored the good or bad. I was like, I felt really guilty judging them because I don't know the person, so I don't know if the lead was bad or good. So I ignored that part and just focused strictly on the names, other people, and I got like a no preference between either of them. So. But my question is like, what about for people who have like slower motor skills or can't read that quickly? How are their results in response, since this is all about how fast you go with either one?
That's an excellent issue to bring up, accessibility. I don't know much about what they've done to make it more widely accessible like that, but one thing I can imagine is that if you are taking longer to respond, there's still going to be a proportion,
Right.
your time for one thing versus another. But that's a really, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's...
My guess
I'd like
is the
to-
algorithm's that way, but it tests you both ways. It compares your personal response time to it. Because I think that's why I got very strongly on the poly one. That was my second test, and by then I had everything memorized. So and I can categorize pretty quickly and take tests pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I figured I'd be more middle ground, and being that skewed that way makes me question as an engineer, I'm questioning the test.
And we have every right to question.
We need those sorts of questions. It's important.
Yeah, and we have every right to question ourselves after taking it as well.
Yeah.
Did everybody sign in? We can send a copy of the presentation to everybody whose name is on here. I'll just send it back in case some folks got missed on the side.
So to connect this back to some of the other things we've talked about, I will share that the result I got was like, I don't know if the term was moderate, it was a little bit, some kind of a preference for people who are not Arab Muslims. I thought that was interesting because, like you said, I have many people who, some of my best friends, or, I was that guy, right? But I realized I had a very one-sided view of who Muslim people could even be for much of my childhood into my adolescence. All I saw were the kinds of things you talked about, violence. Being Jewish, the Israel-Palestine conflict, I often got a very one-sided portrayal of that issue, So even though I know better from experience, and yes, my best friends are Muslims, and I'm proud of that, but it still apparently affected something in me, even if I know better, right? So we all know better, but that's the work, I think, of being a person, of being a compassionate person. That's the work, it's the icky stuff, but that's what makes us grow, right? You can't have the roses without the garbage, right? You gotta have dirt. So.
I started laughing when I took it because my husband's name was in there. I'm like, how is this not going to be straight? Right? So I got slight moderate preference for people who are Arab or Muslim. And when I thought about it, because I'm not, but I am Muslim, I thought, well, I'm less afraid of people in general if I know that they're Muslim because they're less likely to hate me for no reason. So for me, I was able to sit through. That's possibly part of it, right? But moving on, we're going to talk a bit more. And Daniel wanted to conclude.
Yeah, Paulo Freire, who wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed, he's one of my personal role models, and a lot of the teaching work I do now is based on his theoretical framework. But he said solidarity requires that one enter into the situation of those with whom one is solidary. It is a radical posture. Right? We hear the term radical often used pejoratively, and it's important to realize, radical can be for a positive side, and to really be empathetic and really take the perspective of the people we're trying to help or understand. That is radical, and it's something we should all try to do every day. And also, here's radical Islam, right? So, thank you, everybody.
Okay, so I'll be wrapping up by focusing on inclusive practices that institutions can implement in order to better create welcoming communities and sustaining communities for students who identify as Muslim as well as students from other backgrounds. Again, the beloved community is an ideal that we are far from attaining, but just a little bit of background. So I've been Muslim for 3 years. I converted. I identified as Buddhist before then. I've been a student at UC before, and I've been Muslim at UC, but I haven't been both at the same time. So again, Maryam is our representative student in the room, but I'm really looking at it from a staff or faculty perspective as to what are some large and small things that we all can be mindful of, and ideally on a systemic level implement in the future that can be more inclusive. So campus-wide initiatives prove extremely helpful for developing greater cultural awareness of students from all sorts of backgrounds. Campus-wide programs that actually help to develop faculty and staff awareness of Muslim student identities and what actually comprises those. So, for example, coming to this today, this is a great example of really just trying to increase your awareness. Mending conflict by really adopting the concept of religious pluralism goes a long way as well. I had a conversation with the executive director of the Council for American Islamic Relations in Cincinnati last year. She actually had to assist some students at UC to even get the creation of the Muslim Student Association approved. It took years. It was actually a bit of a battle, and it actually took a Christian student organization stepping in and saying, hey, this is not okay. This organization has the right to exist, for them to actually get approval as a registered organization. But building awareness of more than just the status quo of one student group will make everybody more curious as to what other groups are we missing out, what other groups should we be catering to. Of course, there are issues like recruitment versus retention, right? There's a lot of emphasis on how do we recruit students from underrepresented minority backgrounds, but once they're here, right, if we accept them into our programs based on who they are, because we value on paper who they are and we need those diversity ratings, right, how do we actually create an environment in which we can retain those students and they can self-actualize their identities while they're here at UC? Of course, there's the bottom line of, the more diverse our recruitment and retention is, it's the future of all organizations, and we'll be able to keep our doors open. And then, of course, we struggle with this, for example, in the College of Engineering, as far as faculty and students go. Like, we can admit students or we can hire faculty, but can they actually feel comfortable in our cultural environment? And that can take a long time to shift. So some long-term ideas. Sitting down and understanding each other through specific interfaith dialogue can prove very helpful as well. UC has an interfaith coalition that you might not be aware of that's done some really excellent work. After the recent Pittsburgh shooting, they were present at the vigil at Hillel, just off campus, had a number of speakers from the Interfaith Coalition there. But UC isn't too active beyond this organization that I'm aware of, of actually bringing students, staff, faculty together. Safe zones, I was just telling Daniel and Miriam earlier that the only place on campus where I've seen a sign that says Jewish students are welcome here, Muslim students are welcome here, is on the window of the LGBTQ center, which is wonderful. But it places a lot of burden, I think, on one office to welcome all students, when that really should be the university's objective. A few quotes from a graduate student at University of Chicago about the value of safe spaces. She said, having a safe space to pray, have religious talks, or even just catch up with other students, created an atmosphere where we could feel comfortable in our own skin. It allowed us to learn more about ourselves, who we were, or even just as citizens in society, and we learned how to better connect with other students and organizations, which proved to be a learning experience for everyone involved. One thing I was really excited to see for the materials and mechanical engineering department is we created, we have an advising syllabus that we distribute to all of our students. Last year we added a cultural resources section, so we have not only where can you go for tutoring, where can you go for counseling, where can you go to be a person, right? Because engineers are people too. So we're trying to really push that idea in freshman year. George Washington University actually had specific counseling for students of specific faith backgrounds. A couple of years ago when there was a lot coming out through the media that was placing students under a lot of stress, they had a Paint Your Faith events where students were able to creatively express what their faith means to them, silently, without having to publish it on social media. A few success stories that are particularly impressive. At NYU, Muslim and Jewish chaplains took 15 Jewish and 15 Muslim students on a service trip to Katrina after the hurricane. The results of that trip, they actually founded an Institute for Multi-Faith Leadership and created a documentary about the experience that's called Of Many. MIT took some Christian prayer spaces and repurposed them to accommodate students with more faith backgrounds, and they currently service 28 different student religious groups. Pretty amazing. And Harvard, their athletic department teamed up with Student Affairs and their Muslim Student Association to create women-only gym hours. So female students could exercise without having to wear lots and lots of layers and could just feel more comfortable using the campus facilities. Pretty cool. Other possibilities, Islam Awareness Week is an official event in the UK. It is not in the US. A couple years ago, our UC MSA did host something for Islam Awareness Week. I think last year there was transitioning leadership, so not so much. We haven't yet hosted a Muslim Support Day, but CARE at Cincinnati, as I mentioned, is interested in hosting that. World Hijab Day is a thing. This is on February 1st. One of my colleagues who teaches at Xavier University advises the MSA over there, and she makes this a campus-wide event where students of all kinds of backgrounds can wear hijab for a day and then come together to talk about their experiences, how they felt, and really developing empathy through that practice. There are interfaith dinners off campus on a regular basis. Ramadan is at a different time of year every year because we're on a lunar calendar. But the Clifton Mosque feeds the entire community of hundreds of people every night for a solid month. And if you're looking for opportunities to meet people from literally all over the world and have great food, you can go there. They also have a sacred table event on Sundays. I think it's once a month. That brings together folks from a lot of churches in Clifton, as well as temples, and it's at the mosque. There are workshops that you could actually bring into your classes from the Council on American Islamic Relations about basic rights of students who may be from other countries, as far as if you're traveling, what are your rights? If the police come to your front door, what are your rights? What can you do? A whole bunch of possibilities there. The food's great, as I mentioned. A few more resources I'd like to share with you. So this is sort of a highlight of recent events at UC, which are really exciting. So last November, funding was announced for the founding of an Islamic Studies professorship. We were actually talking earlier today about what does it take to actually create a department of studies, right, and to actually develop an academic presence. We were talking about Hebrew Union College just down the road. We were talking about the Department of Judaic Studies. So we're hopeful that this will be the first step in creating an academic presence on campus and hopefully access to more accurate information about Islam and Muslims that faculty and staff can refer to. There are actually 2 interfaith meditation and prayer spaces on this campus, which a lot of people aren't aware of. One is just down the hall, it's in TUC 409. Another is in the 60 West Charlton building, so the building that the African American Cultural Resource Center is in. We're actually hosting Friday prayer, which is the equivalent of Sunday church service, but it happens on Friday afternoon every week. So that's in one of these rooms once a week. We're currently in conversation with some folks at College of Medicine who came to this presentation back in the spring and said, what's the recipe for an interfaith space and how can we create one? So they're actually in the process of trying to create a space right now for their staff, faculty, students as well. I've seen students sometimes using it for interviews if they can't find a quiet place, right? But students will go in there to pray, meditate, and the creation of these spaces, research shows that folks from lots of other backgrounds end up using the space, even if it's one particular student population that requests it in the first place. And it can be a really excellent resource. For, I believe it was their Eid event last year, the UC MSA won an award from the Student Activities Board. That was pretty exciting. This is a shot of what one of the prayer spaces looks like. So you have prayer rugs, you have meditation pillows, you have a sign that shows which way to face if you're practicing prayer in an Islamic style. It's pretty simple, but just having that space to go to makes a huge difference for students. They don't have to pray in the hallway or in the library when people are going between classes, and just having a quiet space is really wonderful. In the classroom, you can use the test we just mentioned. Screening authors before you recommend readings or require readings is also very helpful. You don't want to inadvertently say, read this article by so-and-so happens to be an Islamophobe, or so-and-so might actually have extremist views about the religion. So you've got to be sure to screen those resources first. There's an excellent TED Talk we don't have time for. She's from Australia. She's a mechanical engineer, I believe. It's called What Does My Headscarf Mean to You? It's really excellent, and she basically takes off various layers while she's talking, and she just asks you to check your bias in the moment, right? What do you think of me dressed like this, or like this, or like this, or in my construction worker pants, right? So that's a really excellent sort of reinforcement of a lot of concepts we covered today. This is her. She's a person and an engineer. A couple other resources, we talked about media, we talked about film representation. Real Bad Arabs is a documentary as well as book. This is a new resource I just discovered this year. Is anyone familiar? She's on Instagram, she's pretty popular. Huda Fahmy, yes, I'm hot in this.
See, other people ask that question. It's a fair question.
Absolutely hilarious. She's going to be publishing her first book on Amazon soon. But she's really fabulous in tackling a lot of these issues with a fantastic sense of humor. She even characterizes the personal FBI agent that she suspects is assigned to her and her husband and is tapping their phone. This wonderful, well-intentioned white woman, her name is Susan, and she asks a lot of the I don't mean to be rude, but questions. And she really unpacks a lot of the cultural issues that Muslims are facing in the U.S., and it's relatable to everybody. It's really great. If you'd like to know more about what other inventions we can attribute to Muslim civilization in addition to coffee, this is a great book. You can get the book for free as an ebook at UC Library. Seeker's Guidance is an excellent website with vetted Islamic scholars if you are actually asking your students to learn about the actual traditions of Islam, the actual religion. So those are very well vetted teachers as well. Educators' Right to Islamic Religious Practices by CARE is available for download. If you want to know more about how Islamophobia is impacting students, you can check out islamophobia.org. A number of trainings that you might want to bring into your classroom or bring to your office are available here. Be sure to reiterate to your students that if they do experience discrimination, that they know where to go on campus. Last summer I connected with a graduate student from Iraq who had gone to Ambeds, didn't really get anywhere, and wasn't sure where else to go to. She ended up going to the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Impact, and they ended up teaming up with CARE in order to actually get legal representation for her and resolve the discrimination case she was facing. There was another case last year, professor at CCM wrote some really hateful comments on the student's paper, and because CARE Cincinnati actually does have a staff attorney available who works pro bono for these cases, that student was able to be represented. So there are many more resources than there used to be, but making sure students know what they are, where they are, and that they have the right to access them is tremendously helpful. A few practical considerations. There's a great story. This was a male Muslim student who was at UC a couple years ago, and he was just praying in an empty classroom. There are 5 daily prayers, and a lot of them have a relatively small window of time to pray. Nobody was in the classroom when he started, so he gets out his prayer rug and he starts praying. And when he finishes, there are 2 female students behind him who have unrolled yoga mats and have been following him as he's praying. And one of them says, you know, that was great. Are you doing it again tomorrow? And he said, that actually wasn't yoga. I will be doing it tomorrow. I was praying. It actually looks pretty similar to sun salutations, if you're familiar with yoga. But even just watching a quick video on YouTube, like what does Muslim prayer look like, right? It'll help you figure out if someone's stretching or praying in the library, for example. Before each of these prayers, there's a ritual ablution that's called wudu, and if you go into a mosque, there's a specific area where you can sit down and wash various parts of your body. The last part is the feet. If you're praying on campus and you don't have a place like that, and you walk, if you walk into a restaurant and you see somebody with their foot in the sink, that's probably what they're doing. They're not trying to make a mess, but they're actually washing up in order to pray. So just even having awareness of that, and if you have, for example, in the West Charlton building where we have Friday prayer, we've had a couple of housekeeping issues because there's, one bathroom really close to the prayer space, and male Muslim students and males in general don't necessarily clean up after themselves as much as women do, so we've had some, wet floor issues. But just even having awareness of what that is and training your staff so, they're not trying to flood the place, they just need to pray. And even having a little bit of awareness of, where are common foods that Muslims can't necessarily eat, as well as Jewish students, vegetarian students, right? No hot dogs, obviously. Marshmallows, though. S'mores are out, unless you've got vegetarian marshmallows or kosher or halal marshmallows. As Miriam, I think, mentioned earlier, if you do have a student in your class or your organization who is Muslim, be sure not to out them and pin big questions on them like, so what do Muslims think about fill in the blank? When I tend to get those questions, I say, which ones do you mean? The ones who go to Kentucky, the ones in Somalia, the ones in LA, right? It's one component of all these identities and what Islam looks like and how it's practiced and how people dress and how they respect each other or don't respect each other, or follow the tradition or don't follow the tradition. It depends a lot on the education system and the infrastructure in the country in question. And then showing support during immigration crises. UC International does a good job of, they hosted a coffee and conversations sort of emergency panel after a lot of the travel bans started rolling out to answer questions and really help students understand how they were and were not impacted. But even just if you're meeting with a student and you're aware that something has just rolled out, there's a new executive order saying, how are you doing in light of that? And just showing awareness that the students might be dealing with this can be really helpful. So to reinforce, not Arabs are Muslim, not all Muslims are Arab. Right, as the gentleman in the back said, right there's plenty of diversity that we cannot see. And there are plenty of Muslims who don't look Muslim. Right, there are plenty of African American Muslims. The first Muslims in the U.S. were captured and taken here as slaves, right? So Muslims have been in the U.S. since colonization of the U.S. started, essentially. But awareness of Native Muslims here is pretty low. So just keeping that in mind. Diversity brings a cultural depth to campuses. It brings a greater sense of pluralism. It essentially benefits all students. And so we wish we could spend more time talking about more student populations that are often mistaken for Muslim or face similar challenges as Muslim. But we're hopeful that today this can reinforce at least an understanding of intersectionality, and that it's not helpful if we jump to assumptions like, if they have an accent, they're probably from here. If they identify as this, they're probably on a student visa. We simply don't know those things. So we'll close with this as our final quote. We've got a few minutes. Here are our references. We'll go ahead and send our presentation to everybody. If you want it, you can save it. But a couple of questions for you. What is something you learned in today's discussion that surprised you? And what is something that you plan to try in your daily work, in a project next year after winter break? Anyone feel comfortable answering either of these questions? Anything surprising or something you'd like to try? Yeah.
The stat that one of you shared earlier, I think it's you, with the Muslim advocates and the map that had where the crimes have taken place. I was surprised how low the number was. I expected that it would have been a lot more than 120.
Those are just the cases that were reported to the FBI
Okay. Yeah.
as hate crimes.
Right.
A lot of people who are victims of these sorts of things, survivors, don't necessarily want to come forward.
Sure. And that makes sense.
That is surprising.
I was curious, I want to zoom in on that map, and I'm curious to see what this area looks like zoomed in. So I wrote the site down so I can take a look at it later.
Absolutely. I have a friend who was almost run over a couple years ago near campus because the truck driver thought she was a terrorist. So it can happen anywhere.
We're all friends here.
I have one question. It's kind of relevant. Can I cut somebody off? That's not really behind me. If you already mentioned it, forgive me if I missed it, but will you be offering this session again? Because I have, co-workers and colleagues that I think it would be beneficial as a team.
Excellent. They're hoping to have us present on medical campus in spring semester.
Interesting.
Yeah. We're trying to get it on video today. We'll see how that turns out.
Yes, I think one of the things that I need to do is I need to learn more and do more research into the Muslim culture. Where I've lived and the students that I've worked with, I just really haven't encountered it. So I just don't really know much about the culture of the religion. Absolutely. And just, my life experiences.
Yeah.
I hear that.
And knowing what you don't know is the first step of many exciting ones.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe you mentioned health at the very beginning. Do you have a statistic on how many students on campus have self-identified as Muslim?
HR doesn't track that.
Yeah.
We tried looking it up. MedCampus is trying to get that data as we're creating a course space, but it's just not trackable. It adds to the mystery.
When I was when I was applying for a master in the US, and I'm currently applying for a PhD in the US as well, there are a lot of identification for the ethnicity. So there is like white American, there is Native American, there is Latin American, there is Asian, but there's no Arab and there's no Muslim. So that's a big thing in like all the websites, all the university websites in just
Every form is different. Sometimes there's just a white / Caucasian / Middle East / and sometimes there are multiple boxes. It can be pretty confusing. So my husband is from North Africa, and he's the North African equivalent of Native American. He's not Arab, he's something else. And so when he's filling out these forms, oh my goodness, he just puts other most of the time.
Yeah, this is what I do as well.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel good. Other. Yeah.
But then it goes to the point where like, right, white, you know, that's the default, is you're white. Is the
Yes.
default,
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So they-
Exactly.
Although I think it's interesting because you don't get asked if you're Christian either. So I think it's a religion thing that we're just told not to ask about religion. So that's why it might not be a demographic we have. Because thinking about all the access to data, right? Religion is not one I think we ask.
I believe, and it was up until the 80s, I want to say, that Jewish was a separate race on the census forms. Now we're white. Colorism is a totally different topic. Yeah.
This one, it's not something I want to try after today. This is something I started this term. Just wanted to get some feedback on whether this is a good idea or not.
Sure.
So like on the first day of class, I identify myself as old and white and male and straight and Christian and looking like the kind of person that maybe isn't going to understand what you're going through and not a good resource. But then I tell them about like within my family, being on suicide watch or family members with depression and all these things and friends who are Muslim and various religions and gay and bisexual. So just basically saying, if you don't know who to talk to, is that more isolating or more not isolating for people?
Well, I think it humanizes you, right? Which I think encourages students to think of you as more of a multifaceted person and not just a talking head. And I would imagine it would potentially encourage them to be more authentic in interacting with you and saying, well, if he's owning his identity and he's transparent about it, and he's, running the classroom, then maybe at least one-on-one with him, I can do the same thing.
I appreciate the humility in that. I think it sounds like you're acknowledging, like, listen, I don't know everything about what you've been through, but I want, you have good intentions and you're upfront about it. I mean, you're not putting anybody on the spot. It seems.
How do you feel it's been working?
Seems to work okay. I just the students who have come to me are the ones who have like the suicide watch thing. It ticks with someone every year. Or every semester I've had to deal with it. And so this is the first semester I've kind of let them know I'm ready for it. But I haven't had any. I've lived internationally, I tell them that, but I haven't had international students coming for help or Muslim students or anything.
Were you going to say that?
Yeah, I was going to say that it's in a classroom, you all learn from each other, like professors learn from students and students learn from professors. So when you say that in the beginning of the class, then students, when you say something that is not related to their experience or their culture, they might actually come forward and say, no, this is actually how it is. And then everyone will learn who they are and where they come from and what is their experience. Because I think that from my own experience here as a student, there are some professors that I can talk to and say, no, this is how it is in my country, or this is who I am, or this is what my experience is. But with others, I would just say, no, they are like, as you said, white, male, straight, Christian. I'm not going to go into this debate or discussion with them because they are not open to it. But the way you do it is like opening the conversation and letting people actually come to you and like also teach you about who they are and share it with you. So I think it's important.
Something I've also done for about the last year is I have a safe space statement that I put in my syllabus, and I read through it out loud on the first day of every semester, and I just read through every single one of those identity markers, right? Saying regardless of bucket list of how you identify, how you feel, this is a safe space for everybody. And I just encourage everybody to be mindful of their intentions and the effects of what they say. That seems to have worked pretty well. Yes?
This kind of goes along with that, and I know I see a lot of advisors in the room, and you mentioned earlier that the LGBTQ Center was the only one that had anything saying Muslim students are welcome.
That I've seen.
Okay. Are there other types of symbols or things you would encourage like putting in our offices to help signify to students, other than maybe a paragraph that you would put in a syllabus?
I think the coexist sign is pretty great.
Yeah.
Covers a lot of bases.
And I think every college should have, like, at the beginning of the year, like an information, like share the information with the students about the resources that they have in their college. Like saying, this is the person that you can go to when you're facing such a problem, or this is the person that you can talk to if you're feeling, as you said, like in the beginning of your class, this is how you do it. So I think the students need this kind of resources. And I think having, as you said, like one person that you can go to is very important, no matter what your background is and
So we stayed until the end, so you get a special treat. Got a really quick, very heartwarming video. This is one of those trust experiments. You might have seen a video of this before. They've been coming out a lot the last few years for a person of various identities standing out as a social experiment to see how people react to them. But this is a reinforcement of the idea that to embrace is a verb and not just a concept. This was in Sweden. Very vulnerable.
I'm not Muslim, but I respect.
Jag känner kärlek från dig. Hej, jag. Gud vad vackert. Hej, hej. Du med.
Thank you so much for coming out today. Thank you.